Very good. It's 1:30, so we will begin the liquor control agenda for today. Steve, I don't know if you got a hold of Lydia. Is she going to join us? She is joining us.
She's on the phone.
So Lydia's on the phone. So welcome, Lydia, as well. And when you have anything, just feel free to jump in. We have 5 items on the agenda, and so we will begin with number 1, approve minutes of the May 18th, 2022 regular meeting. We have them in front of you if there are any changes or corrections. Otherwise, we will accept a motion.
So moved.
We have a
Second.
motion. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 2, review liquor applications. 2A, application for the transfer of a Class Z alcoholic beverage license to D&C Lab LLP, doing business as Labby's Grill and Bar, to be located at 1100 19th Avenue North. This is an ownership change. Steve.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner, and congratulations on the results last night. We'll start
Thank you.
with that.
Thank you.
It did get to be a bit of a late night, but we're going to work with the county to see if we can speed things up in the future. But
And thank you, Steve, for all your hard work. I appreciate that. And do you mind, I know it's at liquor control, but obviously it was late. Can you give us a little bit of what went on from your perspective?
well, sure. We're going to take a detour off liquor and talk elections here. So I was working the absentee precinct, and what we typically see is about a third of the people will vote early, a third absentee, and a third in person. Well, this election that was not the case at all. We only had about 3,100 that voted early. We had 5,100 absentee and well over 12,000 last night that voted in person. And so with the vote centers, rather than having just your precinct with maybe 200 or 300 people voting, and then you close out and you do your printout of your tallies on that machine and then bring it all down to the courthouse. Well, now the machines that are doing the tallying are tallying every vote in the, that voted at your place, but they're all county-wide. So, we could have had somebody from Tower City that came in to vote for the mayor of Tower City and voted at the Fargo Dome, and so that one gets wrapped up in there. So the printouts took over 2 hours long to get that. So that was the first delay. Like you said, some places had lines. So anybody in line at 7 o'clock got to vote. So that delayed the start of the printing. And so, yeah, it did get to be very late.
No, and I apologize for kind of putting you on the spot, but I do think it's good to get that information out because a lot of people otherwise you hear rumors about other things. And so thank you for doing that. And also we had people that volunteered. So thank you to all the people that help with the precincts and obviously all the people that work on your staff. It's a long day. So thank you very much for that. And I apologize for the detour, but it was a good thing. So, okay, go ahead, Steve.
So with Labby's, Dan and Carol Lavernick have been the owners of Labby's Inc. Dan is trying to set up a plan for retirement. And so Carol wanted to get out of the business and she's not working there any longer. And so they're bringing on an additional investor. We've hit the 50-50 threshold. And then going forward, then Dan will be able to continue to sell percentages of his business until the new person ends up with 100% of the business. So it's just kind of a retirement plan, I guess.
No, that's great. Thank you for the information. I don't know if there's any comments or questions on that, but it's basically, would you say, a gradual ownership change? Sometimes we have it where it's all happens at once, but this is more over a period of time.
Yep.
And then once it gets 50%, then it has to be.
Then we have to do the transfer. They did discuss about doing something, less than 50%, and then they would have had to come in later and do that. So if they would have done less than 50%, more than 5%, and less than 50, he still would have had to gone through the background check and been listed on the license. But at the 50% level, now they pay the transfer fee one time, and then they can go through the rest of the transition over the next 5 plus years, and Dan can then enjoy retirement. And
I guess this is interesting because it kind of applies, we've had some questions about ownership and percentages and how often everybody is evaluated as far as their background check. So I think this is kind of a good example of how that actually is happening in the real world. So
sure.
Any other comments or questions about it?
Well, and just that we did go through the, the normal background check, and, there were no issues of concern on either individual.
Very good. Lydia, you're online, so if I can't see if you have your hand up or not, but if you have any questions, please speak now or forever hold your peace.
Thanks, Dave. I have no questions. I move to approve.
Very good. We have a second?
Second.
Any other comments or questions? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And 2B, United States Acts Manager.
Yes, so if you recall, when the United States Acts was granted their liquor license, we said when you get your full-time manager, please submit them for the background check. And so that's kind of just completing her portion of that. There's no items of concern with Tony Paquin. So I don't even know, if there's an actionable item here. She's just fulfilling the requirement or the request that this board made.
Okay, and so actually we have taken action on it. This is basically an update?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. So I don't know if there's any other comments or questions. Otherwise, we'll just move on unless somebody has something they want to bring up. Okay, then we'll move to number 3, the Police Department Monthly Report, the General Report. Chief,
Thank you, sir. Congratulations on your election as well.
thank you.
I have several items here. I think probably to start with the follow-up from Lydia from the last meeting in terms of the intoxication or public intoxication issue in our downtown area and homeless folks. Jillian Gould was kind enough to pop in here this afternoon and address those questions and provide their perspective. So if you're good with that, I'd like to start with her and then she can move on from there.
Good afternoon. My name is Jillian Gould. I am the Homeless Outreach Coordinator for the Harm Reduction Division of Fargo Cass Public Health. That includes the Gladys Ray Shelter, Fargo Detox, known as Withdrawal Management Unit, as well as the Downtown Engagement Center, our mobile outreach program, homeless outreach, a whole plethora of stuff. But I have had the privilege of working downtown with our homeless population for the last 6 years, and our division has been in existence for the last 12. I'm here today because our director is on vacation in Portland. She's very lucky, so she asked that I step in for her. We see issues of over-intoxication downtown on a regular basis as well with some of the folks that we serve. Unfortunately, the only answer to that issue is getting them housed. Many of the folks we serve end up committing acts of drinking in public, over-intoxication, trespassing, maybe urinating in public, which are things that you and I would do in our own home. So from our division standpoint, we really feel that housing is going to be the answer for this problem. Research has shown once we get our folks housed and keep them housed, they aren't downtown over-intoxicated. They're not interacting with law enforcement. They're not having as many behaviors, so to speak. So Jan wanted to make sure that I touched on that. And we very much appreciate the support from the city that we've gotten to do the important work that we do. I think it's important to point out in the United States, there's over 20 million people that struggle with a substance use disorder, many of whom we never see or hear from. So unfortunately, the folks that we serve are very visible with their life circumstances. And with that being said, once we can get them housed, they're less visible. Do you guys have any questions for me?
So we have a kind of a handout in front of us. Can you help explain it to us? I don't know if everybody has one, but it's this sheet where you show the numbers. Can you help explain that, Neil, or is that something different?
That's not my sheet.
Okay. Then I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So the people that are in your center, are they given? I'm sure they're given an option to go through treatment. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
And is just give us that experience, how that goes.
Absolutely.
Please.
So everything that our division does is rooted in the principle of harm reduction, meaning many years ago and over time, the thought process was if you want to get sober, stay sober, go to AA, go to treatment, zero tolerance for any kind of relapse. The harm reduction model focuses on, well, everybody's recovery looks different to them, and we need to help support them however that journey may look. So whether that's eating a sandwich before they go out to drink for the day, or if treatment is something that they want, absolutely we will walk that path with them. It is very difficult to get folks into treatment. It is an uphill battle. When they're ready at that given moment, and if we can't make it happen, sometimes that opportunity passes. The beautiful thing about the work that we do is we keep coming back and we keep trying and engaging in those conversations and those relationships, because those relationships are ultimately what helps us motivate a change in behavior.
So obviously, it's not required, but I mean, you make the offer that they
Every
know that they're
single day.
welcome to go through. And so do we have, I guess my question is, as a city, do we have enough money for those programs if the people that are there, from your perspective?
As a state, we do not.
Okay, but I'm talking about the city.
And
'cause
even as
I'm
a
not
city,
sure-
there's not enough treatment resources, no.
But my main concern is in Fargo, at your center, I want to make sure that we have enough support so that people say, hey, I would like to go through treatment, that we have the ability to support them. Would you say we don't?
No, I would say that we do.
So
Our
to
staff
me-
do an incredible job.
Okay, so I guess that's the main thing. I don't know if anybody else can speak too, but to me, that's my main thing. I want to make sure that people, if they have the opportunity,
If they're
and I
ready,
guess,
we will get them there. We'll do everything we can.
any other questions?
Yeah, I just got one question. From your perspective, what is the kind of the magnet that downtown brings to that community? It seems like other
Yeah.
parts of the neighborhood, or other parts of Fargo, we'll have this map, we'll look at it in a minute, but other parts of Fargo, you don't see that congregating of
Yeah.
over-intoxicated people.
That's a great question. So I think one of the beautiful things about downtown is it's very walkable. It's appropriate to walk up and down the street, not be looked at differently because you have a backpack on. So our folks feel that they can blend in a little bit better. We get a lot of questions about groups are intimidating, or if there's a group of people congregating on a bench. A lot of people don't realize that our folks do that primarily for safety in numbers. They feel safer when they're surrounded by friends. Many of the folks we serve are victimized, whether it's due to an assault or a sexual assault or involved in some human trafficking activity, and there is safety in numbers with that. There are, things that bring folks downtown, like the bus station and the library, and they're the few places that people can go and they're not looked down on because of their situation. So that leads to that.
Yeah, specific to some of the conversations that we've been having here, do you have any common wisdom or thoughts on the density of alcohol retailers downtown? Does that contribute to the problem? Or and then more specifically, the type of alcohol that might be consumed, as in high-proof items or miniatures? These are things that have come up here. Any common wisdom?
So the folks that we serve with such chronic substance use disorders are going to drink, and they're going to go wherever they need to go to get their alcohol. We know that. We've asked them, if they stop selling off sale, would you stop hanging out downtown? No, because it's their community. Our folks tend to try to buy the smaller items because it's easier to hide on their person or in their backpack. So that is something that we have seen historically. So grabbing a traveler rather than a 175 of vodka is easier to conceal so that they're not getting a citation from law enforcement.
Okay, good answer. So, I mean, your opinion would be that if they can't get it here, they're gonna get on a bus and go get it, or
They will.
walk farther to get it, or whatever. So,
Absolutely. And I think they'll still continue to come downtown because it's their community.
okay.
And I guess I have a question kind of for the chief as well about the department. Obviously, when you have repeat people, and so then you refer them to you, and how is that relationship, if you don't mind talking about that?
We, in the time that I've been with the city, our relationship with law enforcement has just improved. I mean, it's gotten better and better. I think mobile outreach and the work we do at Detox and the shelter has helped build that relationship between our division and the department. We talk to law enforcement every single day. I know our downtown resources officers, they're calling mobile outreach for help. And we're able to brainstorm on, so-and-so is really hitting it hard, or we're seeing this cycle going, can you guys intervene? Which is where our staff can step in and try to provide that intervention. It's honestly probably the best relationship that I think we've ever had, which is a beautiful thing.
So do you sometimes have people like walk with the downtown resource officers? Because I mean, I'm sure they know, and I'm sure you do too. It's just kind of the same individuals.
Yep.
And so that's awesome, because I do think that's part of the issue. the officers have a lot of other things to worry about.
Yep.
And so, no,
And that's the nice thing. A lot of our programs really try to take that. If it's our folks that are causing issues, we want to take that pressure off of law enforcement because we have the relationship with folks and we can oftentimes de-escalate things or get things redirected in a different manner. But we walk regularly with the DROs. All the officers throughout this entire city are able to call our staff if they have somebody in a crisis related to their substance use. We have 2 of the school resource officers coming downtown to help with some outreach and some assertive engagement stuff. So we're in constant contact to see how we can do things better.
I just have one more. So how is your occupancy rate? Are you full all the time? Are there seasonal types? Can you talk about that?
We are full all the time, unfortunately. We are seeing a lot of, we're trying to recover from COVID in a lot of senses, where during COVID, many of the services that our folks depended on stopped. So we're seeing kind of that, we're trying to tread and get back on our feet and get folks back on their feet, which has taken time. But our shelter is consistently full. Our detox numbers have been consistent as well. In the summer, we tend to see folks that will sleep outside more just because it's easier than sleeping in a dorm full of men that are snoring and smelly, to be completely honest. Also, they're not at risk of being in a congregate setting when they're outside. So during the pandemic, we saw more of that as well.
I'm sorry, and one more question. So we now have the center right across the street, or almost from here. Has that been, obviously, and that was partly because of COVID, but how has that gone?
It has been wonderful. So we are currently open from 9 a.m. until 8 p.m. Throughout the day. So folks can come in, take a shower, do their laundry, get some respite from the street, grab a drink of water, use the restroom. And then we're just starting to gear up some engagement center activities. So actually on Memorial Day, we had our first cookout where we invited everybody to come and have a hamburger, talk to us about what services they see as being good or what they want to see. We had almost 80 people show up for our barbecue. So it's been busy, but it's been very good.
Very good, thank you. And go ahead.
I just want to commend you on the work that you do. And as a downtown resident, I have called your mobile outreach unit and I have witnessed the compassion and care that those workers gave to the people who I called about. And it just, I get emotional talking about it because it was one of the most kindest gestures that I've ever seen. So they deserve dignity and they deserve to be treated as such. And I just really appreciate what you and your co-workers are doing. So thank you.
Thanks, Kay.
Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, thank you very much for the excellent presentation. And if you wouldn't mind, every so often, I think this would be good to have you kind of just give us an update how
Yeah.
things are going. That'd be
We'd be
great.
happy to come in.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks.
Okay, so we got a presentation relative to the windbreak. I think I'd like to just go through the monthly report first, if that's okay.
Yep.
There's just really nothing remarkable on there, but there's 2 instances of underage inside, and I just want to let you know what happened with those. So on one of them was at the old Broadway, and that was a situation where another patron actually approached security to let them know there was an underage person inside. They appropriately asked that person to leave, and then that started a confrontation between the person who told security and the person who was getting ejected. They had their scuffle and left before our officers got there, so we weren't able to determine who that person was, but they obviously did the right thing in terms of getting the person out of there. The other one is noted, it's part of an investigation at District 64, just part of an, not that happened there, but part of an investigative follow-up. We did determine that there was an underage person in that particular establishment. That individual was referred to city prosecutors for that violation. There wasn't anything to indicate that the establishment had done anything wrong in terms of that person being in there, other than there were an underage person inside and had consumed. So that was the extent of that particular, those 2 instances. And unless you have any other questions on the monthly report, I didn't see anything else that stood out.
Any other questions?
Chief, do you know, does District 64 have a scanner, or why was there a minor in there consuming?
I don't believe they have scanners. I'm not sure what their carding policy or philosophy is. And I guess also just to bring to your attention, we had part of this investigation, we needed to get some video there relative to our investigation. We ended up having to apply for a search warrant to get it. There was some apparent misunderstanding in what we were asking for versus, I guess, what the owner thought we were trying to accomplish. So just so you're aware, we're setting up a meeting with the owner to go over all of those expectations. Not that they have to provide us the video, but why we're asking for it, and trying to establish, again, a cooperative relationship. But I don't know if that'll come up on your radar, but just so you have an FYI that we're going to meet with that group as well and go over some of those things. It's a relatively new establishment.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and then this was a presentation. This was a follow-up to some previous requests for the board as well. So our intelligence and analysis unit looked at liquor establishment forms from January 1 through May 31st. There were 50 total businesses that had at least one liquor establishment form. A total of 195 forms. The windbreak accounted for 45 of those forms. Well, the other 49 accounted for the other 150. So a large percentage of those forms for one establishment, just in terms of overall data. Comparison for context, the next closest establishment had 15 forms filed at Summit Nightclub. And then you can see the other ones on the chart there. In terms of who called it in, not necessarily a negative that a large amount of their forms were a result of staff calls. And in general, well, there's another slide here, but okay, so they're calling on many of those. Were there about a third of the time based on civilian calls for service. This is a little bit more than other establishments in terms of disorderly behavior observed when we're at these particular instances. 47% of the 21 times that were there, so probably 10, 11 times, we see disorderly behavior versus other establishments, which the colors are kind of reversed, but no disorderly behavior 73% of the time for the other establishments. Management cooperation seems to be about equal in terms of windbreak versus their comparables. What we see more of, and the issues that we discussed earlier, are the crimes and the over-intoxication issues. So in terms of there's 9, 11, about 20-some crimes there that actually were reported to us as a result of these calls, from assault to DUI, sexual assault allegations, those kinds of things, just in that one establishment versus all of the other ones in the gray as comparables. And I think the big one that stands out as a real unusual piece is the over-intoxication issue. So you've got one establishment accounting for 8 over-intoxication cases during that time frame, and the other 49 establishments accounting for 12. If you look over to the detox, that's 3 of those 8 people that were taken to detox versus 6 of the 12 in others. And then the arrest piece as well. One establishment has as many arrests as the others combined in terms of whatever violations were there when the cops got there. So it kind of looks like this again. They have a large percentage of crimes, violations, disorderly behavior, and over-intoxication kind of in general data comparisons. So they account for 1 out of 4 of the liquor establishment forms, 34% of the total violations. They're the only business with multiple over-intoxication issues. However, with all of that said, and if you look on the report, we had been seeing probably the last month and a half fewer issues there, but there is one on here from June 2nd where, again, we had a patron who was so over-intoxicated that she had to be carried out of the bar. The staff did call, and they said, look, she just became unresponsive just out of the blue. She was vomiting. She was in pretty bad shape. So that still kind of leaves us with where we were, I think, last time in terms of our ability to enforce any violations or prove any violations. I went over all of this information with Nancy Morris, the city attorney. We both concur that at this juncture, we don't see that there's any actionable items for us to do anything more other than to continue to work with the bar owner. We did establish a liaison with the manager and continue to monitor their activity. So I mean, absent any other questions or input from the board, I think that's where we're at.
So if you don't, so Chief, you know, some of the things we talked about, obviously, we'd much rather have them voluntarily do things, but like closing a little bit early, doing things like that. And the meeting that we had, it was less than cordial. They didn't seem like they were all that excited. I do hope, it sounds like they're at least maybe trying to do a little bit. Is there something we can do? I guess that's what concerns me. It's like, it seems like our only options, we don't really have like a gradual process. You know, I do think the whole trying to cooperate, that's good, but it doesn't seem like we have a gradual process.
Yeah, and I think this would be a good time now that election is over and we've got certainty on positions here, that the board is interested maybe to go back to some of the earlier recommendations that the city attorney I made in terms of changing some of these ordinances to give you greater latitude, to put you in a position, even in instances like this, to effectuate some kind of additional oversight or requirements for an establishment, perhaps. You know, I think there's a lot of things that could be discussed at that level if the board would like to do that. I don't know if the city attorney wants to make any more comments on that.
And Kay, you had a comment?
That's basically what I was interested in. My question is where are we at with that penalty matrix that we started working on? And can that be changed so that we have some leverage here to deal with what we're dealing with?
Yeah, and so just to help clarify for you, the penalty matrix really deals with violations that we can prove and then what's the penalties, which is definitely an area that I think all of us agree that we need some enhancements. These other suggestions have more or additional, probably new or amended ordinances that would provide the board greater latitude and control of a licensee. Let's say we've got this continual data here that we can show, you know, how difficult it is for us to really prove an over-intoxication case from an ordinance violation perspective. But when we talk about their management or safe operations of their facility, it's probably not up to a public safety level, but there's something in between, and we don't have any ordinance authority for the board to do anything. I think someone may have mentioned, can we put them on probation with some kind of restrictions, or can we require them to do A, B, and C until we see an improved business atmosphere? And we don't have that, you don't have that ability. And I think that's where additional ordinance discussion should occur if that's what the board would like to do, because we're kind of doing everything that we can with what's available to us.
And so Nancy, maybe you can just start working on that, because I like I just said, you know, we met with them and we try to have them, you know, there isn't anything on we're just doing it cooperatively. Well, that's good, but to me it seems like all we have is that, or then the extreme is to lose your license, and it seems like we don't have a gradual way to say, you have some issues, we think you should address those. And I don't know if everybody else is in agreement of that, but something along that line. Go ahead, Nancy, and then anyone else will have. Go ahead.
So I appreciate that, and I know that the chief had presented a number of possibilities of changes that would be appropriate. I don't believe this board has voted on any of those to move them up to city commission for direction to do that. That's kind of the process that we would generally undertake under these circumstances to change the ordinance recommendations from this body.
Can I just add one more thing? So the thing, we have had issues with other bars in the last few years when I've been here, and we've met with them. One of them made massive changes, and now they're no longer an issue. The other one, the Africa Club, we changed ownership. So, I mean, each one is its individual thing, but to me, it just seems like we should have a policy that we can kind of follow. And maybe you want to talk about that, Chief.
Well, I think that, no, you're right. I think what we need is some additional ordinance authority for you to do something in the middle. That other establishment had provable bona fide criminal activity occurring, so it was an easy public safety issue. This one is a concern, but it's in a gray area in terms of enforcement, provability, that kind of stuff. But something in the middle that would provide you the ability to do just what you said. You know, they could on their own close earlier, they could do a number of different things. They could put PBDs with their bartenders, and we gave them a number of suggestions, but we can't make them do anything. And so maybe some ordinance language that would allow the board the ability to put those types of sanctions on a business without taking their license, but doing something to address obvious issues like this, because it's hard to imagine that all of these things are happening in one place and there isn't something that could be done to address it. We have seen, I think, a decline in activity the last month and a half or so, but we just again had an incident in early June. So
Seems like they're taking an inordinate amount of the city's resources when you look at those statistics
Well,
and those
right.
charts. And I mean, would that ordinance give us the ability to, like you said earlier, closing time, 30 days where we require to have a police officer on site where they pay for it? How much potential latitude would you have with an ordinance?
well,
like
we
that?
wouldn't pay for a cop to be there, but we could create an ordinance to provide restrictions for them to close at a certain time. Do some of the other suggestions that we made to them when we met, from either the PBT, the scanner, if you think that's an issue, some of the other specials, things that they do. What time is their last call? That's always a big scurry to the bar too, and you've got a bunch of drinking in a small amount of time. So I think there's a number of things. If we had an ordinance to give you that ability and you put those sanctions in place, we would merely make sure that they were enforced. We would go and check, and we would also be monitoring this data, and we would hope to see then a reduction in some of these issues.
How about the over intoxication issue? Would that be something that, it's a penalty matrix issue, or is it an ordinance issue? How would you
If you
get your
can-
arms around that at this
Yeah.
establishment?
And so we checked with, again, the city attorney's office and kind of supporting some of the comments that we had made earlier, that it's extremely difficult to prove as an ordinance violation, because we would have to show at what time we'd have to show they were over intoxicated before the bartender served them. And, how much did they consume before they went into the tavern, wherever place they went to at the end, in order to substantiate that as an ordinance violation, which of course is very difficult unless you have someone sitting there watching the bartender, which would not be an excellent use of police resources. Sure, we could ask for video, but again, we have issues getting video in a timely manner. And it doesn't necessarily, it may or may not support that, but I think it's still a difficult case for a city attorney to prove. But if you're looking at language in terms of sanctions, we can certainly provide you this data, and based on that and those issues, if you craft an ordinance that gives you the ability to either a probationary status with certain sanctions, then we would be able to enforce those sanctions and see if there's compliance and see if that helps change the behavior of the establishment. I think would be at least the starting point there.
But Nancy, I guess that's the thing. We have to make sure that they also have their opportunity, if they're not happy with the outcome, to appeal and all those kinds of things. So we have to make sure that we follow the rules. So that's your job. And I do think it'll be a challenge, but I think we should, and obviously we have to include the industry and all of us in it. And so I think if at this point, it's a good time to get started with reviewing what our options are. Go ahead, Nancy.
So I concur and appreciate that there needs to be parameters, as there are with the present penalty matrix. If we can prove over intoxication, if it's not a criminal charge, can we prove it to sufficiency for a violation here? How would we do that? And that's something we can talk about further. If we get the credit card receipt and there's 10 drinks on it or something, there is the possibility of doing that even if you don't prove it as a criminal charge. But the other aspect of that is, if we don't prove that, but they have, so the part of the issue here is they are called for over intoxication there. It does appear that it's at a certain location. Is there a parameter that if we get 5 calls within 6 months, then the penalties might kick in? And again, I'm just thinking out loud here that we need to be able to know what behavior in what time frame and how you plan to address it, to know if you have a violation. There has to be some certainty in making a determination of a violation before there's any penalties imposed, including probation or other types of penalties. And again, we've talked about, do you want to have an ordinance that requires video? If you want to have that as a licensed establishment, what does that look like? What's the quality of the video? How often do they have to update it? When is it available as a liquor establishment, as opposed to a business that isn't licensed by the city of Fargo? Same thing with scanners. We don't have it. It's not required. People have chosen to do that, but there isn't anything in ordinance that requires that. And again, what are those parameters and what's the penalty for not having it if that becomes required, and how long do they have to get it? So just some of those, the specifics that I think we've talked about, but I don't have the direction on the drafting of the ordinance that I'd be needing to present that.
And comments, go ahead,
A
Robert.
couple of things, Chief, I think the data is very powerful, even though this is still a small set. I think your optimism about this time of year might have more to do with the sun staying up and people being outside and bars not being as busy. One thing that I would be interested in, I don't know how this data could be collected and what legality of it is, and I'm definitely a person that doesn't believe government should try to manage legal businesses. However, in beverage alcohol, there's certain business practices that ethical bar owners that I know stay away from, and it kind of borders on the term of pandering, trying to create business, and it involves pricing and promotions and the size of a shot and a drink, et cetera. The Canadians, for example, very clearly bring a shot glass with an ounce and a quarter or whatever to the table. If the bars in the United States, they free pour a lot, et cetera. So I think if we had a determination, are they doing, for example, ladies' nights with free drinks, which to me is like irresponsible? Are they doing 2-for-1s that last for 4 hours instead of a happy hour type situation? So how we would accumulate that information, maybe it would be through cooperation with them and talking about their business practices without threatening them as the operators of their business. And Nancy, I wonder if we developed an ordinance, if there could be a pandering clause to that is going to be somewhat subjective. Obviously, it's going to be the opinion of the board. Is this place operating responsibly in the way they serve alcohol?
Go ahead, Dustin, you have a comment? Give us a second. Sometimes it takes a while to get the mics turned on. Go ahead.
Dustin Mitzel with Happy Harry's Bottle Shops. Obviously, I don't have to deal with a lot of the issues that this is occurring with, but a simple solution, at least until you can figure something else out, is, if we have a pizza oven at one of our stores that overdoes a pizza and the fire department comes out, they kind of give you a don't do it again. And if you have 3 of those calls, you get a fine or you have to pay for the service. If our security systems at our store goes off and the police department comes out there, you get a couple of that's okay, but if it's excessive and you don't correct what's causing that to go on, you get a fine or you have to pay a penalty of some sort. If you have excessive calls and whatever that number is, they start getting billed for the police department coming out there. Money talks, and a lot of times a monetizing of that excessive calls will force the business to do corrective action. In my 26 years in the business, anytime there's been a bar or a situation where law enforcement of the city is saying that we have a problem, 99% of the time those bar owners do some kind of adjustment and fix it so their business is healthy. So I'm just saying, if we get penalized on these calls for service that are our fault, smoke alarm or a fire or a police or a motion detector going off, we fix it ourselves. So maybe that would be a simple solution until you figure out some of these other details. So
That's a good point. Thank you. I don't know if I think basically we're just kind of initiating discussion again, and Nancy's kind of got direction now as to what to look for. Go ahead.
I guess if I could add, I think for specific direction, it would benefit us to get some action from the board in a motion to have us do something or ask the city attorney to put something together. I think that's the real action that we need if we're going to put some time and effort into bringing forward some proposals for you to consider.
I'd make a motion that the city attorney move forward with drafting a proposed ordinance that would give the Liquor Control Board more authority to enforce provisions to improve bars' performance. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
I'll second it.
Nancy, does that give you good enough direction? Is that motion specific enough for you? And you're not allowed to criticize anybody on the liquor control board, just so
No,
you.
I wouldn't criticize. That's giving me wide latitude. I'm not sure I want to exercise. I think what we will do is maybe come up with, here's some things that we think that you might want to consider, and maybe list it out, and then have maybe a little bit more discussion on that to see which direction this board would like to recommend to city commission for changes.
Yep.
So I'm not gonna start an ordinance yet, but I think we really need to maybe box it a little bit more. Because I'm hearing today, and I don't disagree, if you have an ordinance change, that if you do this, this will be the result. Well, that's what we already have in ordinances, but I don't know if this happens. Is it 3 calls for over intoxication within a certain period of time? Or is it, something like that? So I think we can kind of make some proposals and suggestions, and then it will be presented to you for action.
No, and I guess this is my comment. This is just the initial conversation, and so I hope everybody agrees with that. This is not a finished product, and there's the other thing is we have to make sure we have the industry involved in the conversation and the public. So there's a long way to go. But right now we do have an issue. Right now we're relying on voluntary, and we give them some suggestions. And the other end is we can pull your license. So you have to have things in between to try to get these. We've been fortunate. A lot of business owners voluntarily fix the problems and they go away. But we have to have procedures and policy in place for the people that don't. I don't know if that makes sense to everybody. So, go ahead, Kate.
I just have one question, and that maybe it's more of a comment, but somewhere in that pendulum here that we're saying, well, how many calls, or here's where we go if your license is going to be revoked. Somewhere in there, I would like to see mandatory scanning and mandatory video. I understand that at these cameras down at the signals and the boxes, the utility boxes that are there, that the police can download from their office what that video is at any given time if there's a speed through or an altercation or whatever that happens there. Is that correct?
For a city camera, yes.
For a city camera. So if we put a city camera out for those businesses who are not complying and we continue to have problems with them, can we put a city camera in there so that when we need to have video, you can get it? I don't know if that's legal or not. I'm just asking.
I'll defer. I have an answer, but I'll let her answer.
As will I, but I don't know that I would encourage that. I mean, we're looking at, private property interests here. So I don't know the answer absolutely on our license situation, but I think that might be going a little too far.
Okay.
But part of this is, we have an issue here with this business. They had 8 over intoxication. Everyone else has 12. There's 3 arrests. Everyone else has 3. These are clearly, we have an issue. And so, but we need to have things in place so we can resolve these things without just worrying about voluntary compliance.
Right, yeah, the existing tools don't give us a lot to work with. Yeah.
So this is just an initial, we'll start working on it. So there'll be lots of opportunity for all of us to input. So we have a motion and a second. Are we ready for action? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Was there anything more, Chief, to add?
Nope, that's it, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. It's 2:13. Steve, do you have anything else to add on our agenda?
Yes, sir. I'll try to be brief.
Okay.
So at our last meeting, we had requested some downtown population numbers. I kind of reached out to planning thinking they might have something for me. And the parameters that I framed, they didn't have anything that fit in my box. And so they gave me what they had. And so in 2021, we have an estimate, and that's what those numbers are with the different areas, of 18,725. That goes quite a bit larger than what we'd probably consider just the downtown area. But they do have it broken down where, area 7 there is 1,855, and then a little bit to the north is area 5.01, 3413. So anyway, I think the trend though was what we were looking for. And if you go back to the bottom of that sheet, in 2000, that same area had 16,000 people. In 2010, it had actually shrunk a little, 16,500. In 2020, 16,700, so grown by about 1,000. And now they're seeing that area 2,000 higher. So that's really the trend, I think, that you were looking for on that. And so there's that information. And then I was also asked about the number of off sales in the downtown. So obviously we just approved the one with the Bottle Barn, and then the Empire has a fixed, separate freestanding off sale, and Chubb's has a freestanding off sale both in the downtown area. There are about a half a dozen other bars that have A, B licenses. The B allows them to sell off sale. They all said we do a little bit off the back bar kind of thing, but nobody had a freestanding, and they all said it's a minor part of their business. So they may have a customer that's there and, I got to run home and watch the game or something like that. And you sell me a 6-pack and I'll take it with me, that kind of thing. So I don't think that those businesses are, really, it's hard to include them in, the people that are being an off sale primarily. So does that make sense?
Did you have a question?
I went through the list that you sent out to us, and I counted 9 in the downtown area that have an AB license. And so even though they're selling off, a 6-pack of beer, like you say, there's nothing in there to say that they can't open an off sale in their business.
That's correct.
So potentially we could have 9 more off sales in our downtown area.
Right.
And there's nothing that would.
Not under the current
Regulate
license
that.
structure. I just would look at the longevity that those businesses have been operating the way they are. And I think that they are mostly satisfied with the business model that they have. And so I really don't see that any of them are interested in making that change where they would take away some of their floor square footage that they use for the on sale part, and then convert that to an off sale.
But that could change in a sale.
It certainly could.
Okay. And I also have one other question too about Twist. So that's been closed for quite some time.
Yeah.
How long are we gonna renew that, or when does that license come back to the city?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that a lot of the licensees don't seem to understand is that they need to, there's a part of the ordinance that says if you're not using the license, it comes back to the city. The city has been very generous, I guess, if the licensee comes forward in the future and says, I didn't know that I was supposed to request a waiver of that part of the ordinance. And so we actually have a letter now from Twist going through the renewal process. We brought that up to them that, your license, are you going to renew it, or what are you doing with it? And so they have made a request now that will go to the city commission at the next meeting, along with borrowed bucks. Now, when I hear about one that I know, is something's going to happen, like with borrowed bucks, I try to reach out to them. Not sure when Twist closed the doors and that type of thing. Anyway, that's kind of where those are. When they reach out to us, then we'll bring it to the city commission and ask for, that waiver of 25-15-12. And then the city commission has said they don't want to do it more than a 6-month period. And so we'd put them on that 6 month, and then they have to come back and ask again. And then at any time, the city commission could say, no, we've given you enough extensions. And
Okay.
so.
Okay, thank you for that.
So, and then I guess just kind of feeding, if you were done, okay, with just kind of feeding off what Kay was asking about the license renewal, we have 22 licensees out of the 204 licenses that still need some kind of work done. This went to the city commission on Monday night and was approved through the consent agenda. We will not issue the license until all of their boxes are checked. And so what will happen on July 1st, when their license expired June 30th, on July 1st, we will let the PD know these people did not renew their licenses, and then they'll make a visit and say, show us your liquor license. They don't have it, obviously, because it's expired. So they will not be able to sell alcohol until they complete their license renewal. Okay. So there's 22. Some of them, it's just a matter of they haven't written out the check yet or something like that. Some of them have a little more work to do. So.
What's the status on Chipotle?
We haven't received anything from either of them. No renewal paperwork, no rosters, no food sales, and no check. So
And they missed the meeting.
and they missed the meeting. So at this point, we're, and we've contacted them and there's no response. So I'm thinking that they're just not going to renew.
Okay.
And in fact, one of my staff went into Chipotle and said something about getting a beer and they said, we don't sell beer. So
Okay.
it was on their menu, but.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, that's it for today. Thank everybody for coming. Have a good afternoon. It's 2:20. We are adjourned.